What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Transcendence podcast. I'm G.O.D.
And I'm Ray.
And we're your hosts. Take a journey with us into the realms of some of humanity's most inner thoughts and theories about what lies before us and beyond the other side. Take a step back with us from the day-to-day heavy burdens of this constant evolving life. From awakening the collective, astrology, the spiritual divine, holistic health, shamanism, and quantum theory, to the frequencies and vibrations of our universe, history, religion, numerology, and so much more.
We spend countless hours researching to bring you the breakdown of information from some of the greatest minds in these fields and even our own experiences. We're here to challenge your thoughts so that you can reshape your own minds and beliefs into ones that better serve you.
We hope you enjoy the discussions about the supernatural and the ancient knowledge that we have become so fond of, and we wish to share with you so that it may also help you on your quest in this human experience we're living. Let the transcendence begin. Godspeed and share on. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back.
Yo, yo.
G.O.D. here.
Ramon.
All right. So, today, second episode, but really the first real discussion, in-depth discussion.
It's about to get real.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so this episode is called Origins, Before the Past, How Beliefs Came to Be.
And how it applies to you.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to go back and digress a little bit about the beginnings, how they were developed, then how they evolve, and to what they are today and how we perceive things today, and realizing the importance behind understanding that and how it can be applied to your own individual life to help you better on your endeavors.
Right, because all humans since the beginning of time have used things called symbols to basically understand things. Even down to words are just symbols. They're not technically real. They're agreements. They're sounds that we agree that mean something that we're envisioning in our head. So they're symbols.
Yes.
And since the beginning of time, like Gio's saying, our civilization has used these things to develop and raise our consciousness and understand life more.
Yes, exactly. So, you're taking, the first experiences that are being experienced and taking note of them, whether it's mentally or actually recording them down. But if you think about it, recording them down or even sharing them word of mouth, you have to have some sort of interpretation of them. So if you think about primitive time, you think about what about before we even spoke? So that's where symbols and symbology comes a big play into this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a development phase in the mind. Even starting from when we were kids, we watch our parents, listen to them, learn from the people around us, the words and symbols that we associate with today. And I thought of a great analogy of using symbolism for you to understand how the mind works. And think of your mind like a garden. Your subconscious mind. You have your subconscious mind and you have your conscious mind. You have the thing that scans the everyday reality, the thing that starts screaming at people while you're driving on the road, or when you're talking with people on just the daily grind, when you're doing the everyday things, when you're going to the bathroom, when you're eating breakfast. Any of these things, that's your conscious mind. But your subconscious mind, that's this garden of beliefs that you have kind of stored away. Look at it as a hard drive or a garden.
It's kind of like a memory bank.
Right.
Kind of like a picture memory bank.
Right. And what you could look at it as is, and this is once again using symbolism, your conscious mind waters the seeds of your subconscious mind.
Mm.
So as the gardener who is aware of both things, somewhat, you use your conscious awareness to plant the seeds in your garden. And the more you think something over and over again, that's you watering the seed in the garden. Mm-hmm. So over time, when things are repeated over and over and over again, and sometimes in certain circumstances, thousands and thousands of years, like our culture's done, we develop a garden of beliefs. We develop this, we have many different types of things grown in our garden, like weeds and good and bad things. And I guess the goal of today would be to take that symbolism, to take that analogy, and to really kind of go back and see if maybe we could pick out the weeds for you. Maybe we can kind of show you what we've planted in the garden, how it got there, who gave us the seeds.
Yeah. And then what seeds we're starting to plant today, whether they are of your own or are they given to you, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and just we're here to, and then after going through all that, it's basically to tend your garden. We're going to speak on tending the garden, but first going into more about the origins of things, and how they came to be. So you could see that what is maybe in your garden may not necessarily be one of your choosing or even your liking.
Right. And more for the nerds out there, you could also look at it as what's that you got there stored on your hard drive?
Yeah.
You want people to see that thing?
Is that pre-programmed? Did it come with the software itself?
Are you worried about the cops?
Yeah.
Finding out what's on your hard drive?
Exactly.
But right. So, and we find this important because this leads into a lot of other topics that eventually we get into. But it is mostly important to understand why we call it origins, why we think the origins are important, is that's how how do you get to the root of an issue if there is one, right? You have to actually start from A, and you go to B, and you go to C. But, we as nowadays, we're starting at, we could be at M, N, O, P in the middle, trying to figure out what's up when it comes to, say, the understanding of things, human psychology, anything, education, maybe, something outdated. But we have to go in and see how that stuff was actually developed in the first place. But we want to go all the way back. We want to go all the way back before there were textbooks, before there were books at all.
Before the past, before the noticed, what we all have come to learn,
modern day
history classes or whatever, kind of before that. So maybe some of the deeper knowledge that you don't necessarily know or have been taught or actually think of to explore yourself. So that's what we're going to get into. You kind of think about it this way, like, if you're somebody who has, some sort of trauma, like, the trauma, like, the symptoms of your trauma, like what it does and what it causes and stuff. But in order to understand the trauma, in order to heal it, what are you made to do when you're like, say, if you're going to therapy and stuff, you have to revisit the beginning of that trauma, how that trauma started, to notice that it was actually a traumatic event. So you have to go back to the root of things. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the root of how these belief structures came to be, between, the symbology, between just the, what's it called? The natural, that's what I was going to say. The common sense, like how common sense just kind of came in, but we're going to be thinking in the thoughts of as primitive man,
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Pre everything was given to you era.
Yes.
We have to develop things at this particular point in time. And why it's important, because this is where we start. And it's going to lead into many things, say how we developed religions or, just ways of thinking, just certain things. Some of the stuff we might do today in modern day living would maybe primitive and we don't realize it. Like we haven't evolved our consciousness yet in certain areas when we think that we have, yet maybe technology and certain things, how great it can be, is actually preventing us from growing in that area when everything is doing something for you. Compared to the time in the past when you didn't have that stuff, when people had to think. And you know what happened when they had to think? Just like but like anything else, when you practice something, you get better at it. Well, as much as we're progressing with a lot of things, we're declining in our way of thought. And it's important to backtrack and not forget our roots, not forget our ancestors, and really remember how we ended up here, because that will lead us to more answers. That will lead us to progress. How do you make progress when you forgot where you're at on on the scale.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you're developing those answers through that knowledge individually. With that being said,
Because
like,
it's common sense, right?
yes, exactly. Like you think about breathing, like you don't think to breathe, you just breathe. But you can bring an awareness, you have an awareness of your breath, and you can control your breathing, whether it's the tidal volume, the speed of which you're breathing and stuff. So you can control it, but it's mostly involuntary.
Well, what if you had the habit of breathing shallow, which isn't good, right? Well, you're not even aware of it.
Yeah. But
So now you have to be aware of it,
Yeah.
because you have to learn to breathe heavier. And that slows down your heart rate, prevents anxiety, does many other good things for you. But when the fact that our body does it for us, it's this natural technology that the universe blessed us with, that we take it for granted and we become unaware of it. And yet how simple and silly it sounds that we forget to breathe.
And then you have these problems or just these uneasy feelings or just unhappiness in your life. And sometimes it takes just going back to the origins of some of your thoughts and your beliefs, that you're just kind of like realizing that, oh, wow, I'm an autopilot doing this or thinking this or feeling this, that if I just would have looked at where that comes from, where that started, I could actually probably rewrite the story and therefore not have to deal with that feeling anymore, or replace it with something better, or heal something. There's so many different options.
Right. So it's important to be aware. And awareness, I think, will be one of the biggest keys to understanding any of these podcasts that we do, because that's what we're doing. We're bringing sometimes very simple things. As much as it would sound silly to somebody, it's common sense. It's things that we forget. And to sum up the fact that, now we're going to go into our roots and where we started and why we started creating symbols and ways of understanding things, is because it will lead us to what's going on today in the human mind and what's causing division, what's causing things to erupt and separate us all. And as much as we blame each other, I think we're all responsible, because we're not aware of enough and we don't give each other enough credit. Because remember, life isn't easy a lot, and we should be there supporting each other, but we need to now understand so we could reunite. And that's going to go back to understanding human psychology and where everything came from. So, and that's why we're going into this. So, Gio, when you were a primitive human being in another lifetime, you walked out, you looked in the sky, and you're like, what is this? So what did you do? Tell me.
So you got to think about it. You're probably very confused, and unsure. So you start kind of you have that awareness that this is going on. I'm here right now. What am I supposed to be doing? Through that, you may feel a rumbling in your stomach. You may realize, I feel this thing, and you might have I need to eat. I need to fill my stomach or something, and you start going hunting and gathering.
You start learning the human basics.
Yeah, you start
survival.
Exactly. But then you start realizing through that survival that all of a sudden, as night starts to fall, you're just like, oh God, it's getting cold. I need to find shelter. Oh God, there's a bunch of predators out and stuff, and they're bigger than me or just look really ferocious. Like, I need to protect myself. This is the fight or flight now. And you find a place to hunker down. And now with that notion, you realize, well, I was able to go out and hunt and gather when that big fiery ball thing was up in the sky and it was light out. Okay, hopefully that comes back again, because then I won't feel this feeling and I can go about hunting and gathering and exploring and, figuring out more of my awareness, So
right. You're becoming more and more aware through experience.
Yeah.
Right.
So you sit there and you're, who knows? You're wishing. That's the thing. It's like, was there wishing? You're just anticipating for that daylight to come back,
hoping there'd be some sort of hoping there was something there to help you,
because you feel that that's your saving grace right there.
Well, when it did come back up, what all of a sudden
You rejoiced.
the warmth came back,
Exactly.
light came back, predators
And
were
this
gone.
and this develops a certain feeling in the body, you know, you rejoice.
Security.
And so, yeah, you feel better and you feel more like you can do what you have to do and relax. So if you think about it, like that's where the whole start can really be, you know, is going
right, because
to
you're
those
left
primitive times.
Yeah, well, because at this point, let's say we have barely any words say, but let's just give him words. This guy we're talking about,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
for educational purposes.
He has thoughts that aren't necessarily in the thoughts that we're having, like language wise.
Right,
There's
but
no language.
the same thoughts, which is by the way the
Yes.
beauty of language.
Exactly.
Because language is just an interpretation of a thought. So it's same thoughts. Let's just pretend it's our English.
Yeah. As you're hunting and gathering, you're using, your logic to be like, this is something that I have to do. But in order to do it, you may start using your creative side of the brain to be like, okay, well, how am I going to hunt this thing that I saw? Or how am I going to use to cut down this thing? And you start making tools.
Right. And instead of using the word kill, maybe he was just thinking, oh, I have to survive. So he's actually to himself not killing the animal, obviously is, but semantics can play such a crazy role in how perspective works. It could change everything. And that leads to actually my next point, that if this big ball of fire is in the sky, it's giving me all these good things. All of a sudden, I know when it goes down that all these things disappear. Life gets a little harder. It gets a little more scary. And then when that thing comes back up, you know how I feel about that thing? You know how I feel about that? I feel like, wow, this is my savior. It's light.
Mm-hmm.
It's the savior up in the sky.
Yeah.
And a lot of people back in ancient times, this is the way they would start seeing these things. So now as time goes on and many situations and experiences happen as human evolution continues, and now we have these symbols, these things we make up to associate with, say, something like the sun, or animals or deities or weather or space or lights in the sky. There's so many things that could happen. So many stories can be made up. Why? So the mind can relate to it and understand to it. Just like I did at the beginning with the whole garden as your mind, and this analogy, this allegorical thing. And it's really, really important to understand that these symbols did come from a reasoning of, not in a historical fashion. If you would like to believe that, that's fine. But more so, let's say for educational purposes. These things were invented, these stories and these symbols. Why? So I could tell you that this thing was that.
Yes, it's a
communication,
a recording like of all this. You think about it before any language and stuff. So now you start to experience, the rise of the sun, the fall of the sun, day and night,
seasons.
Yes, you start experiencing day and night as being, two things that happen, and you're like, okay, well, it's happening. So, but also in ways, if you wanted to explain it to maybe another primitive being, but you don't have a language, you could have been carving it or drawing it or painting it, whatever it is, in some sort of blood or mud or something like that, to kind of explain to other people what you've experienced on your endeavors. Therefore, you start, creating a story. As you start creating a story, you're using the symbols, pictures. As pictures are being made, then eventually you get into the symbology of how you see how all these symbols and then hieroglyphs, how it turned into letters and language. You see how that's evolved. So, I mean, we're not going to go too much into that. But you just see kind of the evolution of where we're going with this. So now, with that being said, civilization is now starting to evolve and advance. The population then starts to grow because you're able to live, you survive longer. So therefore, there's more
Experience brought this wisdom over time,
and
right?
You're experimenting and
development.
Exactly. So this is all through experience. There's no record of anything. We're talking about before any record of anything. You're just going based off of what you're experiencing. And what are you mostly experiencing from? What's going on above you? You're experiencing what's going on above you because you're looking at the sun and you realize the importance of the sun and how the night is. So you develop that feeling of day, good, night, bad. So there you start getting your first forms of beliefs.
Right. And what's good, what's bad? Well, and actually this is a scientific thing. There's a cell called an amoeba, I think. And they discovered that most organisms have this like amoeba effect where they seek pleasure, right? So all organisms has this like thing where they're seeking pleasure. They're seeking that good feeling, that comfort, that security. It's a natural function. And so how we would associate good bad is I feel good, I feel bad. This thing makes me feel a certain way. So now we start defining things off of pleasure and pain.
Yes.
You know, bliss and grief.
Yes, exactly. And now you're starting to share that and also give that knowledge. You know, I was saying to Ray earlier today, I was like, you think about it now, say you're an older primitive man and you have, you know, it's just you and you have two kids and the wife did not survive and you experience death and you see that, okay, well, she's no longer with us now, you know, in whichever way or language you're interpreting that, the mother's no longer there and it's all about survival. So you're going to teach, whether through word of mouth, through symbolic pictures or anything, and you're going to teach them. And therefore you have a passing down of a story, which is the first beginning steps of recording history. And as you're doing that, then eventually as civilization went on and the language and the symbolicism evolved, you know, there's better record keeping eventually, you know, and then it's about, you know, the whole thing is about, you know, going through those generations, preserving those records. So, and, you know, the understanding grew more and more and more, you know, obviously, you know, as it started with what was above them, there became a huge, heavy importance on what's above you, whether it's the sun, the stars.
Well, it was determining
Yes.
things like, it's very simple, tracking in a season, you would have, say, more towards the fall would be this harvesting time. Like over time, they've discovered that wherever the sun was and the stars were, told them what to do.
Yeah.
It gave them an idea of what animals would be around, when to plant their food, when to you know, prepare it, when to pick it, when to hibernate.
And
right?
that's found out through the experience, because there could have been somebody, you know, who started planting and was throwing down the seeds, but realized nothing's growing. Well,
Right.
I thought, you know, they were going off their experience, but then they start realizing through that experience that, oh, wait a minute, the sun or something is not in the same position as it was when I grew it the first time. Oh, so there's a change.
Well, instinctually.
Yes.
Instinctually saying, oh, we lost last time when the sun was here, we lost all our crops because we didn't pick, or, you know, we had a lot of our members of our tribe die because they got lost in the snow, or, you know, things like that. So yes, through experience, through trial and error, which, by the way, let me throw in, makes it, you should be very grateful today.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, we don't have to
forget that.
really go through a lot of those trials and errors. We still have trials and errors, but not in that necessity. That it's evolved. So, you know, then you think about it. So they start understanding and mapping it out better in order to know, to be able to prepare for in the future. So therefore you have a teaching, a knowledge, an understanding that's recorded and spread out and passed on as well, you know, throughout the civilization. But then you have the evolved, you know, consciousness now becoming so aware of this to the point that there has to be some sort of force doing this.
Right. Because there's a pattern.
Yes.
And things just don't happen. Sorry, I hate to pick at any atheist or someone. You don't have to believe. I'm not saying God or anything. I'm just saying there's a function, and when there's a function, that means there's something that put the function there. Things just don't happen. There is a logical explanation to an extent. I mean, you can, if you go down to the nitty gritty, you could probably outsmart me there. But when it comes down to it, yes, an intelligence has to exist, because things are, you know, if there was no intelligence, everything would just be chaos and craziness. He wouldn't be in this body right now listening to me on this podcast.
It's also, you know, that's as the records evolved and the explanations evolved, obviously it became more of a of a tale. You know, you start explaining. You think about it. You started explaining, whether it was to your kin or to people in your tribe or whatever in the civilization. You know that. You know, you find it in a way to relate and maybe depict it to them. And you're like, okay, well, you know, the enemy was the night, and the day, you know, was symbolized life and all the good and everything. So as it comes to that, you may start putting with the more symbolisms to it, you know, and then you think about, you know, where that comes from. You know, whoever has the knowledge probably holds the most authority.
Well, and let's not forget also how big the earth is and how many different cultures there are. So now, okay, one story all of a sudden becomes how many other ones.
Exactly. Same stories going around in other parts of the world.
And how crazy is it? They might have different names, different...
But you don't know that.
Slightly different versions. Yeah. Right, yeah, you don't know yet.
You don't know.
You just create the
story. You think
story.
that you are the only people.
All of a sudden, you know, you discover this new place with these foreign people. And now you can even pass knowledge on to each other. You meet, you know, that's how humans started interacting. At first, it was probably very warlike and very protective. You didn't know these people are alien. I don't know what.
Well, actually,
you know.
it actually started off where it became once the exploration. Well, first, before we go into that, what I was saying just before, like, is about the fact that now you have the keepers of the records,
right,
keepers of
in
the
each
knowledge,
culture, right, and
then they
we'll
start having an
expert.
authority over the people, and as that happens, and there's sort of like an authority over it, and there's also a protection over it. You start developing your hierarchies and your monarchs,
keepers of the knowledge.
Yes, and you have all that, like you have. You know,
so now status is becoming a thing.
So let's fast forward now that develops and, you know, into more of an ancient Egyptian civilization, let's just say, right? So you have this now, you have the symbology and everything, and you have the higher authorities. The higher authorities start to take on the God figure almost, right. and use the knowledge to portray themselves as the one who knows it all and knows how it works, and therefore the people look to you. And now, as you're growing the civilization, in order to keep order, you have the laws. You have the things that you make, and you sit there and you show, you know, the people that, you know, I have this knowledge. You know, I must, you know, and the people look at you as, oh my God, he must be a god.
Right.
So you could get into the whole fact of that, even, you know. The skies are the heavens, you know, and then also, you know, the sun. Now you go into look at Horus. Talk about, you know, about Horus, the Egyptian god.
Absolutely. And the opposite being Set, which, by the way, is where your little word sunset comes from. Because if you relate back to sun worship in Egypt, and which in relation to all this is, you know, they named stars, they named the sun, they named the sun. If you look. This is documented stuff that they named the sun god. They represented the sun in the sky as Horus, which, by the way, is an anagram for hours or horizon,
exactly,
or things like that. So there's all this wordplay and symbolism. There's all these things playing this factor for to help the mind grasp these things. So, and to cure that last one up is Set. So Horus, the story is Horus. During the daytime, they symbolize in the story as would kill Set, and Set would be gone and disappear. And then when the sun would come down,
and why would they? And you think about it, it's like, okay, well, why would they personify these planets or, you know, celestial things? You know, well, you got to think about it. We're humans. You know, we were humans. The way to get them to understand
characteristics
was give them human characteristics. They're like me and you, and this is what this one did, and this is what the other one did, and therefore you have your start of the story.
Well, we write movies.
Yes.
You know, we in this day and age, we have this crazy technology where we could CGI a movie and we create these characters based off of these mythologies. And where do you think when people write, say, something like Marvel movies or any of these superhero movies and stuff like that, they're archetypes of the mind, meaning, actually, let's go down this route. Stephen King got a crazy mind. He writes all these crazy horror stories and this and that, and a lot of the stuff he thought of, it came from his own mind. And who knows, maybe it came from things he experienced when he was a kid. Maybe someone in his family was crazy. Like, so instead of maybe falling into those, like thinking that way and becoming those things, an artist will take those archetypes and make things of them. And that's one way of looking at symbolism. Or you could take things that you see that are actually real things and give them a story. If you don't have a name for it yet, if you don't have an understanding of it yet, well, now I'm going to give this thing a definition or a personality of how I could, right, but in how I could relate or how you can relate. I want to make you understand it to the best of my ability. Yes. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make the story to give you this emotional and mental definition of this thing.
Yeah, this way you understand the importance of it.
Right.
So it's something that you're actually taking in and sitting there being like, okay, well, you know, now that they understand that, and this is how we're trying to run our civilization, you know, the people are a big part of the civilization. They need to be on board as well with this thought construct. And there you go. You have your whole belief right there.
Right. So now the story starts somewhere, usually very simple, and then they end up developing, and every culture is different because let's say environment, you know, being in, Europe and then in the South Africa back in ancient times was very, very different compared to each other. So maybe they experienced different rhythms of nature and different views of the sky. Mm-hmm. And so now they develop these just, you know, they're different stories, but then they have, for some odd reason, wow, that guy, he was born of a virgin. Oh, but that guy was born of a virgin, and all these other things. And you start saying, wow, this story's coming from somewhere. This is repeating over and over again.
It's all different interpretations
of the same symbols.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how crazy is it as each culture thought they were so separate, and this one worshipped this thing, this god, and then this culture worshipped this god. And now what do you have? Now you have war.
Well, yeah, and that's why I was saying that things was because now you have this belief now in place.
Right.
And if you go back, this is actually true. It starts with like the whole first time of actually gardening and harvesting. You know, you think about it, you have your civilization. Now you guys have been able to thrive in your land, and your population has grown. Therefore, you're going to need more land. You're going to need more. So as the exploration went on, that's where eventually, as you're exploring to increase the size of your land to withstand your people, you start moving into other territories. And then all of a sudden you come across, there's other people there that are not part of our civilization. So in the beginning, you try to communicate with them, and you probably don't have the same communication or language skills and all that. Like it's probably different. So, you know, trying to establish that, that understanding. But as you're doing that, you know, yes, there's probably a lot of other civilizations that they were able to break through and you know, mend those two communities together. But there was probably others, which this is really actually true, that eventually, you know, they saw that it was like, oh, they're moving in on our land, or they were skeptical because this was foreign to them. Who are these people? We thought we were the only people.
Basic survival. Yeah. It's survival.
And where it comes from then is also your explanation. And there could be a disagreement, and a disagreement in beliefs and way of life. So therefore that happening, there's
like a discord.
Yes, a discord between them, and that could lead to, like you're saying, then you have the whole
war. Now all of a sudden we're fighting
violence.
Now it's wars of God.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's wars of belief. Yeah. Right. And that's why it's so important to understand the origins of belief and where things come from. Because if you understand that we're more unified than we think, we just happen to just be separated by a way we say something or the way we describe something. But in the end, it usually comes pretty damn close.
Yes, all our thoughts and beliefs, and they've all been experienced pretty much through the same origins, but interpreted differently. So then, when those paths crossed, where it was this interpretation versus this interpretation, you know, that's where the threat of your life and your way of life comes in and starts creating that discord, which creates the disharmony between people and
Separation.
the separation, and then the violence of trying to take over that land because that person's bad, but the other side views those people as bad, and that's where you have this whole division and then conquering.
Right. And now we see where civilization's going.
Exactly.
And now we see why it's so important to understand where things come from. And, there's a lot of things in between. It's a very interesting subject, I mean, we can only touch up on so much within an hour. So to really get to the point here is, all of these things in development of civilization and development of language and just human consciousness in general, it's going to be rather important to know how things became because where we're going. Now, if you look at the world today and where we're heading and how our evolution's going, dependency on technology, dependency on the government, listening to media, all that stuff is, now we're talking something similar here.
Yeah.
We're talking beliefs. We're talking things, and especially in an age where information is so plentiful, right?
So the things that are structuring your mind, thoughts, beliefs, a lot of them have origins and some of them are new and upcoming. So, and with that being said, these types of thoughts and beliefs can dictate how you move through your life, how you act, how you feel, what you actually do, like all those things.
Who you associate with, what parties you join, what people influence you.
Yeah, who are you around,
And then, it could get into plenty of other things, like going back to now, like basically what he's saying, let's bring it back to the beginning of the episode, the garden. So now you go back into your garden, and sometimes you've let your garden grow without realizing it's growing. Like you've just been watering these plants on automatic for so long. So now you have just weeds and weeds of other people's beliefs and things that you were told and things that you were taught in school and what your politicians told you and what your church told you. And I think to break down and pull the weeds for anybody, that's the first step of changing your life, is going into your garden and realizing that you've been watering these plants that are ugly and don't serve you, and they don't say bring you any wealth or food or nourishment or anything like that.
It's like the example I used before when I was like, okay, so you go into your garden and you see that there's dandelions. You didn't plant the dandelions, but they're there, and you may actually like them. They're pretty looking, whatever. You keep them in your garden. But now as you're going through tending your garden, you're trying to plant new seeds. Say you want to grow tomatoes, and you're sitting there trying to grow tomatoes, but your tomatoes aren't growing, or they're coming out weird or something. They're just not growing. And you're like, you want to know why they're not growing now, your garden.
Maybe the soil?
It could be the soil, or it could be the weeds. The weeds that were already planted there in your garden can be sucking the life or taking away the nutrients for the tomatoes.
Right.
So what do you have to do? You have to pull those weeds. So it's the same thing with your beliefs. Like you may have beliefs in place already in your mind or in your garden that were kind of just instilled upon you from the moment you were born, growing up, through parents, religious figures, all that, teachers. And as you're going through life, you're trying to accomplish new things. That's your tomatoes. You're trying to plant your tomatoes. You're trying to plant new seeds and new things and new ways of working.
Nourishment.
Yes. But as you're going through life, you start having some issues, and you see that they're not, what you want is not coming about. And if you look deep enough, sometimes it could be that those implemented already beliefs that you kind of grew up with that also are held in your subconscious are interfering with the new thing you're trying to do. So what do? You have to pluck the weeds. You have to reshape, how you actually believe, go back to where that came from, and realize if it's actually working for you or not, or is it keeping you from growing and harvesting those tomatoes?
Right. And actually, let's really take it holistically here. Let's go back before. Let's say, okay, we pull the weeds, right? Mm-hmm. We clean the garden.
Yeah.
But what's the most important aspect of a garden? The soil. And why? Because that's going to determine the quality of your garden.
Yes.
That's home base. That's the foundation. And what symbolism could play into your soil? What if you were to say, okay, my mind's a garden, what's your soil?
Yeah. What's your foundation?
Well, I'm asking you.
Yeah.
In a sense, what symbolically could that play? Your emotional foundation?
Yeah. Exactly.
Your core beliefs, your set beliefs, the things that the common sense you hold in your mind, the things you get up, you go brush your teeth, and you say, this is my standard thing I look at about life. Like, is my soil good before I can even start a business? And these are seeds planting. Start a business, start a band, start a podcast, become a teacher, become this. How's your soil?
Yeah. What's the quality of it? Because you're sitting there like, okay, like I don't know what the quality of that's the quality of your thoughts, the quality of your emotions, the quality of, how you're going about and interpreting things. So, you could sit there and you're growing the tomatoes, but then when you grow into it, you bite into a tomato, all of a sudden they're too acidic, or they're too sweet, or there's something, and that's not what you were looking for.
Time to get rid of it.
It's time to replace that soil, because that soil might be acidic. A soil may be contributing to how the quality of what you're growing.
Right. And
that's
here,
your foundation.
It's ironic too. It's funny how the ancients and how religions presented their beliefs as what we're doing this on purpose. This is how you go back and you read about ancient cultures and ancient religions and even some of the religions today, and you realize that that's all they're doing. They're telling you through stories, through analogies, through allegorical ways,
parables,
to understand something. And that's what we're doing with you right now about the actual subject that we're talking about, And then on top of that, now let's say back to the soil and all that. You got your garden, the soil's great, your emotional state's great, you're in a good place, you actually have this good belief about life, you develop some sort of faith or some sort of backbone, and now you plant your seeds, you want to start your business, you want to start your podcast, you want to do whatever it is that you're seeking to do, whatever goals you have, and now you water it with the conscious mind. Exactly. Now you water it with your thoughts, the everyday thoughts, meaning I get up, brush my teeth, and I go, okay, my goals, I'm going to crush them. Now I'm watering my seeds.
Yes, you're going to help them grow. You're going to help them grow. And then that comes to the next thing, though, as you're maintaining your garden and making them grow. You got to remember, though, what's also a big problem in gardening. You have infiltrators. You have infiltrators and parasites coming in, and whether they're eating it, destroying it, or creating toxicity in whatever you're growing. Those are the things. And that's relatable to everyday life when it comes to coming in contact with other people or other thoughts, other opinions, other experiences. Yes. You kind of want to maybe keep some of those things at bay. It's okay. That they're not necessarily all bad. Like, look, they, for them to live, that parasite, they may need to feed off of the tomato or something in the soil that is essential for the tomato to grow.
You started a business, and you got someone who wants to come in and goes, I want to get into that same thing, and this guy's got a thing started and this and that. Now I'm gonna go in there and do whatever I must to get the things I need out of this garden.
But he could be thriving off of your idea, but also in the same way putting your idea in detriment, whether it's because of competition or whether it's because they're assuming too much control, or they're tainting your actual message or your delivery point. So this is how all of this is relatable.
Right. Which is, so now you could see why we went back and we explained that in the beginning of time there was life with no words to it yet, no story. We develop it all over the earth, different cultures, different symbols, all humans trying to live, get by. We go through our survival mode. Now we develop. Time goes on. And by the way, we're not just jumping from that time and that era to come to here to say we're not, like, this is the basis of this podcast, to go back and forth in time to really see the origins of things and to really understand how they were developed and why and for what reason, and what people back in history took this and knew that there would be some gullible people out there that they could take advantage of, those, say, AKA worship gods who grew an ego, feeling and actually thinking like a god and passing it down in their family lineage and saying, son, or my daughter, whatever, you're a god. And we are powerful. We're the king. We're the queen. We're the president. We need
to rule the people. The people need to be ruled.
So you need to tell them this story. But what we did is we kind of tweaked it. And we wanted to tell you that the only way to keep the family tradition going and to keep us in the seat of power. And some of people, let's say they're not all malicious. We need to stay in power because we know better.
Yes.
We know better. People are silly
belief.
Out there.
Yeah. That's their own perception of belief. They think that they know what's best,
right?
Instead of letting the natural law and natural occurrences to happen and allowing people to think for themselves. They look at themselves as protectors.
Some of them, and believe that I know many conspiracy theorists today. The whole world's evil and everyone's out to get us. There's good and bad people everywhere.
There's always a duality.
There is in every race, in every in all politics, in the government, in people, in the upper class, middle class, lower. There you have good and bad. We live in a dual world. Get over it. Stop blaming everybody and stop thinking that there's a certain thing about a certain type of person or a certain job status. Like you can have a rich guy who has a big, good heart. We portray rich people to be these evil people because they have money. And let alone, it could be just simple jealousy. Or it's just because your perception of seeing that person have whatever they want and you don't have everything you want yet, you automatically think that person got either he got something you didn't. He understood something you didn't. You got screwed over. But the thing is, it's all about how you see things. What are your symbols? What are your beliefs? Where did they come from? And the only way you're going to find it out is if you dig through the garden.
Exactly. And that's where we're bringing this in, where we're talking about now the origins of beliefs, to understand our beliefs and thoughts that we use today, whether they're subconscious or not, and then see how they affect our lives. And then, once we analyze, everybody's going to do it individually on their own and analyze their own beliefs and thoughts and the feelings that they get and, the events and actions taking place in their life and figure out, is that aligned with what they really want and what really makes them happy, or do they need to change something?
Well, because that's all that counts.
Yes.
It's not about what you call the thing you believe in, this or that. How does it? What's the quality of life? Or what are you obtaining?
What gives it value?
Right. Is it value?
Yeah.
Do you use it as something that betters your life or makes it worse? And let's go back to the beginning again. Does it make you feel good or does it make you feel bad? And on top of that, does it make other people feel good or does it make other people feel bad? At certain points, you don't care about what other people think. But I'm saying, if you're negatively impacting someone, maybe you should take double check it. But point being, though, as much as we say to be unselfish, and there's a light worker community out there, a conscious truth community, and they talk about empaths and being good to other people. Well, let's get this straight. Simple thing here. And this is truth. And I'll tell you that this is truth. You can't take care of other people unless you've taken care of yourself first. You cannot go garden somebody else's garden. You can't go give everything out. There is a way to do that. Yes, absolutely. And you have plenty of people that will. But you got to remember, most of us are in turmoil because either we're following a group that's leading us down a path that's not our unique path, and we're thinking thoughts that aren't ours, and they're causing that grief, or we're constantly looking outside ourselves and trying to help other people. And yet, let's take care of ourselves first,
yes,
and let's double check ourselves and what we're thinking and believing, and really go in. And not many people like to do that, and we're saying, coming from our first episode, the only reason why we changed is because we went and did what we're talking about.
And you can't change other people or change how other systems work and stuff if you're part of the system. So you have to change yourself. If anything, there's something that you need to do from within that'll emanate outwards. So, it's the same thing. Like even a parable that Jesus used was, how can you point the speck out in your brother's eye without removing the boulder in yours first?
Right.
So, that just goes hand in hand to say with, okay, well, you need to, like you said, tend your own garden, know how to even tend a garden before you can help somebody tend their own.
Right. Or you're not most likely.
And are you even welcomed?
Right. Yeah.
Get the fuck out of my garden, asshole.
Right. Well, and who invited you?
Yeah.
But Plenty of other things. And that was a great use, by the way, of something from the Bible. Now, see, regardless if you believe in Jesus or not,
Yeah.
that's a great line. That's something you don't have to. That's where maybe certain religions got it wrong, where you don't have to fully be, if I could take an excerpt from some sort of book from this culture and make use of it because that plays some kind of symbolic, meaningful definition in my life. And that's a great thing. But you don't have to have this cult-like attitude where, oh, well, if you don't go to the church I go to, or you don't go to the monastery, or you don't meditate, or you don't eat vegan, or that's all that is so unnecessary to shun that on other people, when yet we should just be looking to make the quality of our lives better and others around us, and really just be careful on how we treat others in their gardens too.
Yeah. Like, let me, I can help you if you let me help you. That's the thing. And that's where, we kind of just got into the development of religions, I should say.
Well, that's a big one.
So now with that knowledge, now understanding the development of religions through that way, now, one of the biggest religions out there is, the whole Roman Catholic. I understand you also have, your Hinduism, your Buddhism, your Islam, all the different types of religions. But now what we want to do, since we got into, the development of religions, digress that a little bit more by maybe going into some of these religions now.
Right. And honestly, we're going to probably make a solid episode on that and really break down maybe from research and from personal findings and all this other stuff. I've been reading about this for years. I mentioned I watched Zeitgeist. That's a great documentary to start. There is other sections where I'm not asking you to really watch it, but it is really interesting if you're interested kind of there is a great aspect of where certain parts of religions came from and how crazy that certain facts or parts of each story end up telling something very similar. There's a lot of qualities and aspects of each of those religions that end up actually tying together, which, by the way, let's really think back on how many wars and how many bad things have happened from having a different religion. So I find that to be absolutely important. We're going to spend a whole episode on breaking things down, give you some symbolism, give you some parts of the story where this could have came from, how far it went back, so that would be really the next step, digressing all those.
Yes, exactly. We'll go into that in the next episodes. We'll, like you said, we'll go into, the symbology more. Also, we're going to probably take now, with that being said, a lot of the Vedic teachings, and also the Bible itself.
Big one.
Yes, the Bible itself, and realizing how that ancient science is in there and how it came to be what it is now, that the way it's interpreted, and kind of digging deeper past it, because there's a lot that, if you read the Bible at a surface level, there's a lot that you're missing.
Right. And the irony is, and I don't remember the scripture, but it even says in the Bible that if you read it by the letter or you take it literal, that it's going to be a dark and kind of useless. It's going to be a story,
Exactly. And then you also could see how, like we were talking about hierarchies, how hierarchies,
controlled the mind
using these teachings and this knowledge to develop what we know as religion, which is not to say that all religion is bad and that everybody in religion is evil. But I think that each religion, group, whatever system, there's always infiltrators. Always infiltrators of the garden. Always the parasites, and their agenda is because of whatever gain that they could get. Right. They may see life in a different way.
Well, because of the symbols and definitions they grew up with, or maybe, their tainted soil of bad emotions and attachments to the past and attachments to the way of thinking is. Yeah.
Like we may sit here and somebody may put an importance more on being spiritually tapped in, being more tapped in with, the outer realms, afterlife, all that. And then you have somebody else who may have some of the same knowledge as that other person, but they're more concerned and tapped into and aware of the physical reality, the things that they find value here on Earth. They don't care about what happens after they die. They just want to monetize and capitalize on anything they can while they're here, because they think that that's what life is, and that's what it's all about. Then you have people that do a great balance of both the two. And so that's where we're gonna get more into.
Right. And balance is key. Balance is important. I think life really teaches you that as you go. Like, that whole everything in moderation, and really too much of anything is bad for you. And that goes along with power. And I think we all know that by now. We've all seen enough movies and read enough stories to know that too much power ends up leading to, like a lot of these celebrities end up having too big of a voice and sometimes aren't the greatest influences. Not just them, but politics and people in general. The popular kid in school can basically kind of skew the rest of the football team, or like that one person in that seat of power could change everything. So it's important to know that balance is key and understanding is key, because then if a person that is more corrupted in the mind from past experiences and just kind of this faulted way of growing up and all that stuff, and just basically attachment to his own issues or her issues. Well, if you understand these things, then that person can't have that power over you, or that government, or that church, or that guru,
or that parent,
or the parent. Big one. I mean, that's our first gods, isn't it? That's the first set of gods we get.
Exactly. So I think with that being said, now you have, hopefully now after listening to this, you have a better awareness about, some of human beings, their origins, and, the development of beliefs. So with now that knowledge, in our next episode, we want to break down a little bit about some of these actual religions. Like I said, whether it's the Vedic religions and beliefs, Catholicism, Christianity, Islamic, we're going to go more into that, and even their ancient scriptures, and talk about the real depth in what they're saying and how they all connect,
right?
And the symbology in them.
Yes, and it's actually very interesting when you start. Like, don't think we're going to be sitting here preaching,
Yeah, no.
we're not saying Hail Mary with you, or not, trying to talk anything religious other than these correlations and facts that you could see that they are definitely coming from the same origin.
Yes.
And what that does is when it connects the dots, I'll tell you this right now, and I'm giving you my experience, that it opened a big door. And it freed, this is part of unlocking the prison of the mind, because now you're open to a whole new world of, realizing that it all just wasn't bullshit, that there is this deeper meaning to these things, which leads back to the whole occult thing. Now, I've watched a lot of things lately on people smiting the occult. And yes, remember, dual world we live in. You have a good and bad side, black magic, white magic, all that stuff, all those, magicians and weird goths and all that stuff, nonsense. But point being, yes, you have a good and bad. So because occult means hidden, it just means hidden knowledge within things like parables and allegories. So consider the Bible and all these things somewhat of an occult study. And we're going to reveal that stuff to you, and how certain definitions and things reappear constantly all over these religions.
Yes. There's a lot of synchronicity within all these, ancient texts, teachings, what have you. So that's our next step. There's a purpose behind us getting into this stuff, and you're starting to see a little bit about how that's actually purposeful to you. So as we get into it, you start really realizing and understanding to the point where now you can have a better interpretation and, really think about what are the morals that align with you more, and what is your real values.
Time to clean the hard drive.
Exactly. So,
On that note,
thanks for tuning in.
We appreciate you listening.
Yes, we appreciate you listening. We hope that this brought a good awareness to you, and you now come with us, and as we dive even deeper down and check out all the information we're going to reveal through all these ancient texts.
Check out all our social media. Check out our websites and all that stuff.
Give us a like, a share, and we'll tune in with you next time.